There's a feeling people get when they think about the universe. You zoom out past Earth, past the solar system, past the galaxy, and suddenly every human starts to feel small, almost irrelevant. And from that feeling, a conclusion often follows. If the universe is this massive, then maybe we don't really matter. Maybe meaning is just something we invented to make the silence less uncomfortable. But I think that conclusion comes from a misunderstanding of scale, not as measurement, but as a meaning system. We tend to treat scale like it tells us something about importance. Big things matter more, small things matter less. But that's not actually how meaning works. A star is bigger than a human, but it doesn't experience anything. A human is smaller than a star, but a human can ask why the star exists at all. So somewhere in that gap, size stops being the deciding factor, and awareness begins. We also talk about nothing as if it's real, as if at some point there was simply nothing. No space, no time, no laws, no possibility. But the more you think about it, the less stable that idea becomes. Because even nothing is something we imagine from inside a world that already exists. Physics doesn't really give us clean nothingness either. Even empty space has structure, rules, fields, activity. So the question starts to shift. Not how did something come from nothing, but something deeper. Why is there something at all? And that question didn't collapse into atheism or religion automatically. It just opens a door. At that point, every worldview has to do something uncomfortable. It has to accept that existence is foundational. Something must simply be. Either the universe is that foundation, or something deeper than the universe is. People use different names for that. Some call it physics, some call it necessity, some call it God. But the structure of the question doesn't disappear. You don't escape it by making things bigger or smaller. You just decide what you think reality is grounded in. Now, when people look at the universe, they don't just see scale. They see order. Layers of structure that stack on top of each other. Matter becomes chemistry. Chemistry becomes biology. Biology becomes thought. And it feels purposeful. Not necessarily in a mechanical, engineered way, but in a way that feels like it is allowed to unfold. Like reality isn't random noise, but something with consistent rules that make complexity possible. And that naturally raises a question. Why does a universe like this exist at all? Not just how does it work, but why does it work in a way that allows us to be here? And this is where the original argument breaks. Because even if the universe is massive, even if there are billions of galaxies, none of that directly answers whether anything matters. Meaning isn't a function of size. It's a function of relation, of consciousness, of experience, of something being able to matter to someone. And that already places us in a strange position, because we are not just objects in the universe. We are part of the universe that notices it exists. This is where religion enters the picture, and it often gets dismissed too quickly, as if it's just a coping mechanism for scale anxiety. But that framing is too narrow. Religion is also one of humanity's oldest attempts to connect existence with meaning. To say that reality is not just material structure, but something that can be oriented toward value, purpose, or even intention. You don't have to accept every interpretation of religion to recognize that it is engaging with one of the deepest questions there is. Why does anything matter at all? And what kind of universe allows mattering to exist? So when people say, the universe is too big for us to matter, I think they're looking at the wrong direction of scale. Because scale doesn't just go outward, it also goes inward, into experience, into awareness, into the fact that anything can mean anything at all. We are small in size, but we are not small in the only sense that matters. Because somewhere inside this vast structure of reality, something is happening that can ask questions about it. And whether you call that emergence, or design, or creation, the fact remains the same. We are here, and that alone already means something.